And good evening, I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. Congresswoman Debbie Lesko has been representing the Arizona's 8th District for 5 years now. She's a consistent conservative vote on Capitol Hill and a supporter of former President Donald Trump. I spoke with her this week about the Trump indictment in New York and her work on a committee looking into the origin of the COVID virus. And Congresswoman Debbie Lesko, thank you very much for stopping by here to tell us a little bit about what's going on in Congress and what you are up to. But obviously, we have to start with the big news of the past week, and that is Donald Trump arrested on 34 felony charges. Many of these charges stem from hush money payments to a porn star. They include falsifying business records, bank fraud. We've seen plenty of Republicans, particularly some of your colleagues from Arizona, like Paul Gosar, who says they stand by the president. Andy Biggs, very loud and clear, says he does not think that the president should have been indicted or charged with any of this stuff. Right. Where are you with the president? Do you still support him and stand by him?
Yes, I support President Trump. This is a political persecution. I mean, even the former Attorney General, Bill Barr, who doesn't really like Donald Trump anymore, he has said this is a pathetically weak case. So basically, you have federal prosecutors that didn't take on this case. You have the Federal Election Commission, which years ago didn't take on this case. And now you have this district attorney from New York who is comparable to a county attorney here in Arizona, so let's say Rachel Mitchell, who's taking on these crimes and saying, this is a federal crime somehow, and it's just total political persecution. He campaigned on going after Trump, and he's fulfilling his political promise.
Well, it was done. There was a thorough investigation in all of this. I mean, it seems like a lot of his Trump supporters are saying this is just a political prosecution. But, have you looked into the indictments? Have you read the court documents there and drawn conclusions from that?
I have read the documents, and they're the same thing. It keeps on saying they're falsifying business records. There's 34 counts of basically the same thing. But then in order to make it a felony, he has to say it was to conceal another crime. But then he doesn't say what that crime is. And in fact, a reporter asked him in the press conference, what is this other crime? And he said, well, New York law doesn't require me to say that. Well, you would think if this county attorney is going after the former president of the United States and setting this dangerous precedent, that he would be proud of what this other crime supposedly that he's concealing would be. This is really bad. I mean, you have CNN analysts saying that this is really an underwhelming case. You have people across the political spectrum saying this is a really weak case. And this is setting a very dangerous precedent, because now any county attorney throughout the whole United States, are they going to start going after Biden now? I mean, this is really bad.
Well, let's talk about that. Like, a lot of people have said that maybe this is the weakest case of other legal perils that former President Donald Trump does face. Some of those other investigations that are ongoing right now, legal trouble potentially on the horizon from him, include possession of classified documents, also trying to overturn election results in Fulton County, Georgia. In that case, we have heard recordings of Donald Trump on the phone with election officials there saying, I need X amount of votes. Can you get me X amount of votes? What do you think about those cases?
Well, we'll see what happens in those cases. I mean, you have prosecutors, and the Department of Justice has a special counsel investigating those cases. So we have yet to see what their evidence is and if they're even going to charge him. I don't think they've concluded on any of that yet.
So you've backed the former president in the past. Have you endorsed him in this primary? Are you going to endorse him as he tries to recapture the White House?
Well, it's a little early to say in the presidential election, so I haven't endorsed anyone yet. We don't even know who's all getting into the race. I do have to say, for President Trump, he has a very good proven record of getting things done for American people. So he definitely has that going for him.
Yeah, people are going to hear that comment and say, oh, Representative Lesko not saying whether she's going to endorse the president. I mean, is there somebody else out there that you're looking at that?
We don't even know who's all getting into the president's race, but I think it's a little too early. But in the past, I've always supported the president. I mean, he's zooming ahead in the polls right now. I think this indictment actually helps him in the primary for presidency. And so we'll see what happens. I don't know who's even getting in.
Okay, well, one more question then regarding Trump. There was a report I saw this morning about Trump calling for the defunding of the DOJ and the FBI. Would you support measures like that, taking money away from those agencies?
I don't think we should totally eliminate the Department of Justice or FBI, no. I think that by and large, the majority of people that work in the Department of Justice and FBI are good people out for justice. Now, we saw in the impeachment of President Trump that there are some bad actors in the FBI and DOJ, and now they're going after, it seems like, conservative Americans. So I think they need to be reined in. I do not think we should eliminate the entire agency.
And I'm not asking whether to eliminate it at all, but would you support cutting funding to those agencies?
Well, we have to cut funding, all government funding nationwide, because we're overspending.
But just to those agencies, would you be like, yes, let's cut funding?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'd have to see the details of it.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been doing. You are on a interesting committee, the select committee that is looking into the origins of the coronavirus. What is the latest on that? Where's the committee been, and what's next?
Well, we've had 2 hearings so far. The first hearing was about the origins of COVID. And so we had the former CDC director, Redfield, come in and testify. And he said all along he has believed it is a lab leak from the Wuhan lab in China. And that he tried to tell Dr. Fauci that. And Dr. Fauci ignored him. And in fact, excluded him from a conference call with a bunch of scientists. And then Dr. Fauci himself even said on that conference call about half of the scientists thought it was a lab leak. And so I don't understand why Dr. Fauci went on TV and really pushed this whole natural origin issue without saying there's a possibility it's a lab leak. I mean, we may never know what actually happened because the Chinese are covering this up. What I can tell you is in September of 2019, 3 very weird things happened at the Wuhan lab. One is they deleted all the virus sequences. 2, they changed the authority over the lab from civilian authority to military control. And the 3rd thing they did is they changed the whole ventilation system. So we think something has really happened there. And the probability, I think it's likely it came from the Wuhan lab.
Yeah, and I think you make an important point there, because when you say we may never know, and this has become kind of a hot button political issue about the origins of all this. But yes, I think there's the Department of Energy came out and they concluded, quote unquote, with low confidence that it may have come from the lab. Other agencies, intelligence agencies out there, say that they don't believe it came from the lab, and maybe it came from some place else like that market. So I think the important point there is that it is unclear at this point. Am I correct in assessing that? And is that correct to tell the viewers
It is unclear. I believe that it's more likely it came from the lab than a natural origin, because they haven't found one animal. They've tested 100,000 animals. They haven't found one of them that has this coronavirus. Also, the other thing we're doing in this COVID Select Subcommittee is investigating other things about COVID. What we did good, what we did bad. The school closures were bad. They hurt students' academics, and it wasn't needed. We've seen that European countries like Sweden, they didn't close their schools at all. And so 0 kids died. 0 kids died. They didn't even require masks. They didn't have social distancing. They just carried on with their affairs and did what they needed to do.
All right. Unfortunately, my producer is telling me in my ear that we are way over time already, so I'm going to have to end it there. There's a lot more I'd love to be able to ask you about, but thanks a lot for joining us here today. Congresswoman Debbie Lesko, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.